Part 1. Part 1.
You will hear part of a telephone conversation between a job seeker and a recruitment agent. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 6. You should answer the questions as you listen because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 6.
Yes, so that's Janet Thompson. Would you like me to spell it?
If you wouldn't mind, thank you. Just the surname, please.
No problem. It's Thompson.
Great. Now, Janet, before we go through the openings I have here in front of me, might I just take a few more details to complete your profile on my system?
Of course. What would you like to know?
Well, let's start with your email address, please.
OK, janthompson@hort.net.
I see. Is that Jan as in Jan?
No, that wasn't available. I had to make do with Jann. Here, let me spell it for you again, just to be sure. JANNTHOMPSON@hort.net.
Much obliged. And could I ask, do you have your referee details to hand?
Yes, what do you need?
I need one work reference and one character reference from a friend or colleague.
OK, for a work reference, there's Jane Foote. She's my former boss at Bermuda Girls' School, head of English.
OK.
My personal referee is Monica Carbody. Mon and I have been best friends since we met in Bermuda in 1991, when she was Deputy Head of English under Mrs. Foote.
Perfect. And you mentioned, of course, that you're an English teacher, but are there any additional subjects you're qualified to teach?
Yes, I have a diploma in special needs, and I can also do history to GCSE level.
Very good.
Before listening to the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 7 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 7 to 10.
Do you think I stand a good chance of finding something?
Oh, better than good. In fact, we have some positions we can offer you today. You see, it's not so difficult to find a temporary role. Tell you the truth, there are plenty of them around, but getting a permanent position will prove a little more trying, though. Would you be prepared to take up a position short-term?
Of course, anything that pays.
Excellent. Well, there are 3 positions that I can offer you right now. The first is a teacher of English in LaSalle School. I'm sure you know it, right in the city centre.
Yes, near where I live, actually.
Even better. Well, it's a 6-month contract, and the very attractive thing about this role is that the head of English at LaSalle will, if she's satisfied with your performance after 6 months, offer to make you a permanent member of staff.
Wow, that's food for thought.
It certainly is, bearing in mind what I said before about how hard it is to find a permanent role. The second position I have to offer you is in a school near Chelsea. It's called the Chelsea Free School. Are you familiar?
I can't say that I've heard of it.
Well, this contract is for 1 year, which is a lot better, looking at it from a short-term job security perspective, than the first role I mentioned. But you also have to realise that you are a temporary replacement for a female teacher who has taken maternity leave. There is no prospect of the position being made permanent.
I see.
I have one other vacancy at the minute, though I doubt you'll find it quite so appealing. It's situated in rural Cambridgeshire. I'll spell that just in case you want to take it down. CAMBRIDGESHIRE. And the school simply goes by the name Cambridge, though it's not in any way related to the other more well-known establishment of the same name.
I was just going to ask that. What a lovely location, though, eh?
Yes, but there's a catch. It's only a 6-week contract to cover for someone on extended sick leave.
I see. Well, I guess that's ruled out then. What sort of salary can I...
That is the end of part 1.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 2.
Part 2.
You will hear a conversation between a travel agent and a customer.
First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 17. Now, listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 17.
Good morning. Can I help you?
Yes, I'd like to get some information about trips to New Zealand.
Certainly. Take a seat and I'll be right with you.
Thanks.
Now, where would you like to go in New Zealand?
Well, I was hoping to do a bit of travelling around, actually. There are a few things I'd like to see and do before I go back home.
Right.
One thing I really want to do is go to Christchurch. I have relatives living there that I can stay with, my mother's cousin, and I've heard it's a nice place.
Yes, it's a lovely city. And staying with relatives will help with the budget, of course.
The budget?
It will save you some money.
Oh, right. Well, I'm not too worried about that. I've saved quite a bit of money working in Australia.
Oh, that's nice. Good for you. Well, you know that New Zealand consists of 2 main islands, the North Island and the South Island, and Christchurch is on the South Island.
Is it? I was never very good at geography at school. Do you have a map I could look at?
Sure. Here we are.
Right, I see. And, well, then I'd also like to spend some time in Auckland, and maybe I could do an English language course there. Can you organise that sort of thing for me?
Oh, certainly. We'd be happy to arrange that. But bear in mind that Auckland is in the North Island.
OK. And I'd also like to do some skiing or maybe even some snowboarding. I hear New Zealand is a great place for that.
Yes, absolutely. But you should go to Auckland first for your studies, and then you can get the ferry across to the South Island and take the bus down to the snow.
Oh, I don't like boats very much. I'm not much of a sailor. I think I'd prefer to fly.
Right. What about joining a walking tour? That could be really fun.
Not sure about walking, but joining a tour might be a good way to travel because then I might make some friends my own age.
Now, let's get some details. Can I have your name, please?
Yes, it's Su Ming Lee, but you can call me Sue.
OK, Sue. And what's your address here in Melbourne?
I'm living with my aunt in the suburb of Kew. It's 29 Lock Street. That's L-O-C-H, not L-O-C-K.
Do you have a phone number that I can get you on?
The best thing would be if I give you my mobile. I always have it on me. It's 0402 558 992.
OK. And when do you want to travel? Because you'll need to be down south in July or August.
Oh, yes, of course. That's winter, isn't it? So I better go to Auckland in May.
Yes, let's say departing from Melbourne on the 1st of May, that's a Saturday, and then you could begin your course on Monday the 3rd.
That sounds great.
And how long would you like to study for? A month, 2, 3? What do you think?
Well, I'll probably need more than a month. What about 8 weeks until the end of June?
Fine. I'll see what I can do. Oh, and how would you like to pay for this?
On my Visa card, if that's possible.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 18 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 18 to 20.
Hello, Sue. It's Angelo from Cosmos Travel here. I've booked your flight and I've found you an English college called the Harbour Language Centre.
Great. Where exactly is that?
Well, have you got that little map I gave you yesterday?
Yes?
You see where the harbour is with the 3 wharves and the water?
Yes. Got that?
OK, there are 2 parallel streets. Quay Street, that's Quay, and Customs Street. The building where the college is located is on Quay Street, opposite Prince's Wharf.
Right. Got it. And what about accommodation?
Well, I've booked you into a hotel for the first 3 nights, and then the accommodation officer will find you a family to live with.
Good. And where's the hotel?
It's a short walk from the college, on the corner of Queen Street and City Road.
Which corner exactly?
On the left-hand side as we're looking at the map.
OK, near the little park.
Yes, that's right.
And what about a good bookshop? I'm going to need to buy a dictionary and some English books.
Yes, well, I believe there's a really good language bookshop on the corner of Customs Street and Queen Street. It's near the college, so that's pretty convenient.
Thank you so much. You've been really helpful.
That is the end of part 2.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 3.
Part 3.
You will hear 2 business studies students, Evelyn and Mark, preparing for a seminar presentation. Before you hear the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 25.
Well, I think the marketing of food would be a good topic. I read a very interesting article the other day about the Canadian food market.
I suppose everybody's interested in food, even if it's trying not to eat. Why Canada? I know that's where you come from, but isn't it just all North America, really?
No, that's why I thought this article was interesting. Although lots of US companies are well established in Canada, and vice versa, there are still subtle differences between the 2 markets. It says here, the Canadian market is definitely not a northern clone of the US. I like that. And it says that if you understand these differences, it can have a big impact on successful food marketing.
So I know that Canada has a big French-speaking population in Quebec, Is this what they're referring to?
Not only French and English speakers, there are many different ethnic groups in Canada. It's really quite multicultural. For example, Toronto has large Asian and Italian populations, and Vancouver's got a large Asian population too. And because Canada's population is small, these groups make quite an impact, introducing new styles of cooking. So you can see lots of unfamiliar vegetables and things in the markets, and new restaurants are opening every day. It's great if you love trying out new foods, as many people do.
Which kinds of food are becoming popular?
Well, some Asian food, I'd say, has been popular for quite a while, like Chinese. But now, Southeast Asian restaurants are becoming very fashionable. Then there's Mediterranean, of course, such as Greek, Italian, and so on. But Caribbean and Mexican food is really taking off among young people these days.
So are the supermarkets starting to stock the ingredients that are needed to prepare these foods at home? You know, all those unusual condiments and sauces.
Yes, that's right. It's quite interesting going to the supermarket, isn't it? And noticing how they're introducing sections for foods of different nationalities. You can buy quite exotic products locally these days. The article mentioned that 80% of the Canadian retail market is controlled by 8 major national supermarket chains, so that when they introduce changes, they can happen quite rapidly.
OK. Well, how are we going to organise this seminar then?
I made some notes on the trends in the Canadian market, about changing tastes, and also patterns for where food is consumed. I thought maybe we could summarize it into a chart or table, and maybe use the overhead projector to present it.
Good idea. Maybe I could have a look for similar trends and tastes in Australia and the UK for comparison. Let's have a look at what you found.
Before the conversation continues, you have some time to look at questions 26 to 30. Now, as the conversation continues, answer questions 26 to 30.
The most significant trend, it seemed to me, was that Canadians are definitely interested in healthy food. For example, did you know that salads are the 3rd most commonly eaten food in Canadian restaurants?
Really? What about organic food then? Is that becoming more popular?
Yes, it's definitely moving into the mainstream compared to a few years ago. And a recent survey showed that 4 out of 5 shoppers said that they check the fat and nutritional information on the packet when they're deciding what to buy.
What other trends did you find out?
There's one change I noticed straight away when I was home last year in the meat department. You know, here the meat packaging says rump steak or 4-quarter chops and so on. Well, they discovered that most consumers these days didn't know what to do with these roasts and rounds and ribs. So the government approved a new naming system for cuts of meat, which is related to the required cooking technique.
What a good idea. I've never really understood the difference between sirloin, rump, round and all those names. So how many new categories are there?
8. There are 3 kinds of steak, for grilling, for marinating and for simmering. And then there's what they call quick-serve beef, for stir-fries, I suppose. And premium oven roast, pot roast and stewing beef. It's a great idea, isn't it? I hope it catches on here.
I agree. Any other trends that you thought were significant?
Well, what's really interesting is what the article called mobile meals. In other words, more and more Canadians are eating meals away from home, but not just eating more junk food. They're projecting a 40% increase in snack food sales over the next 3 years, and the growth is coming from healthy snacks. You know, the ones that have less cholesterol and fat, such as muesli bars, health food bars, and those types of products. Apparently, in the food marketing jargon, they're called nutritious portable foods, which means healthy snacks. The other major trend is that young people are doing more of the food shopping these days, so marketing has to be aimed more at them, as well as more conventionally at the mother.
Thanks, Evelyn. I think we'll have an interesting discussion about these trends and the comparisons with other English-speaking countries. I'll see if I can get some information about them to compare with yours, and meet you on Friday to put it together.
See you then. Bye.
That is the end of part 3.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 4.
Part 4.
Listen to the continuation of the lecture about the human brain. Look at the diagram before you listen.
First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
OK, we have looked at the top view of the brain and seen how it is divided into lobes. Now we are going to look at a more complex diagram of the centre of the brain. I will briefly go through some of the important parts that make up the brain and then talk more about what each does. First of all, you can see that by far the largest part of the brain is the cerebrum, and it is made up of the 3 lobes we have already talked about. The lobe below, coloured yellow on the diagram here, is the cerebellum. Right in the centre of the brain here is the thalamus. The hypothalamus is part of it, but it has a slightly different function. Now here, running down from the centre of the brain, is the brain stem. It is made up of the midbrain, the pons, and the medulla oblongata, and is connected to the spinal cord, which you can see here at the bottom of the diagram. Now, finally, this little gland just to the left of the midbrain, it looks like a little tail, is the pituitary gland. OK, let's go back and say something about the function of the various parts of the brain. The cerebrum, the largest part, as we have said, has 2 halves or hemispheres. I will talk more about the difference between the 2 hemispheres later. The cerebrum is the part of the brain that is really our intelligence. It controls voluntary movement, that is, movement that we are in control of, speaking, for example. But it is also responsible for our emotional thinking and memory. The cerebellum is responsible for fine movement and coordination. It helps us with balance, for example, and to understand where we are in relation to space around us. The thalamus, here in the centre, processes what we feel with our body, touch and temperature, for example, and controls how we react to those senses. The hypothalamus has a similar function, but regulates bodily needs, such as hunger and thirst, and tells us when we need sleep. Now, at the top of the brain stem is the midbrain. This is a sort of switchboard, a very complex switchboard. It sends messages which help the brain communicate with other parts of the nervous system. The pons in the middle of the brain stem here sends messages from the cerebrum to the cerebellum and spinal cord. The medulla oblongata is here just above the spinal cord. It regulates essential bodily functions, like breathing and the rate of our heartbeat. The spinal cord is part of the central nervous system and runs down inside the spinal column. It connects the brain to nerves that go to the rest of the body. Now, the pituitary gland, this little gland, has a hugely important function. It releases hormones to the body that regulate all sorts of things. How quickly we grow, and the size we grow to, the rate at which we age. It also regulates whether we have a slow or fast metabolism and how we relate to stress. Now I am going to show you a model of the human brain, and I want you to identify...
That is the end of part 4.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.